We're back with episode 4 of The Step Through, a weekly show about the WNBA, hosted by me, Sabreena Merchant, and Evin Gualberto. Evin, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing I'm doing really well. I'm having loads of fun. Buzzer beater on buzzer beater on buzzer beater. So I'm having a great time. How are you doing?
I mean, I think you captured it perfectly. There's too much good basketball happening right now. It's so hard to keep up with all of it, but it's all really, really good. So almost doesn't feel like work.
No, no, not at all. And the great thing about it is that it's so much fun and you can see the players having a great amount of fun on the court. Like there was that clip of Liz Cambage posting up and she was laughing while doing it, which demoralizing for the opponent, but super fun as a viewer.
I don't want to be a highlight truther, but was that a travel?
We don't need to talk about that. It's called the step through. Let's step through controversy.
Speaking of having fun, I mean, we're going to get to this later in the week, but there was just a great moment when Dallas was playing Seattle earlier where Arike gets a play in transition and then flexes on the Seattle defender. And for someone who's Arike size, I love seeing that. You don't need to be 6'8" like Liz Cambage to toy with your opponents. You can be any size and just have a really great time. So yeah, lots and lots of good basketball. But Liz is actually a really interesting place to start because one of the things that kind of bummed me out about the bubble last year was that of all the opt-outs, it seemed like it was disproportionately towards the really great centers in the league, especially like the bigger centers in the league. And Liz is one of them. Obviously, Jonquel Jones, who we've mentioned a few times on this podcast, I would say. We've got, who else missed last year in the bubble? Tina Charles was out last year. Brittany Griner had to miss the second half of the season. Sylvia Fowles was out just with injury for half the season. So one of my favorite things about watching this 2021 year has just been the return of the center. And it's kind of something, I guess, that's been talked about at all levels of basketball now that I think about it. But I love watching bigs play. And that's the first thing that stood out to me when I was watching Minnesota this week is few things I love more than watching bigs pass to one another. Just high lows, bigs driving, dumping off to the other one when they get into the paint. Like Minnesota has so many good options for this. You've got obviously Napheesa Collier, the queen, right? And Maris Dantas are both in the starting lineup. And Sylvia Fowles usually mans the paint, but that means that we've got tons of high-low action between Dantas and Fowles and Collier and Fowles, or Collier and Dantas. Just any combination you want to throw out, it is happening in the Minnesota starting lineup. And I think that's something that gets a little underrated about Dantas's game in particular. She's a tremendous passer. And the fact that, both her and Collier have to be respected from the three-point line as shooters, I think makes that much more reliable option for Minnesota because it's just really hard to guard somebody who can function as multiple threats in that way on the offense. So high-low passing in Minnesota, one of the best things I saw this week. And it doesn't just happen in the starting lineup. If you're a regular to this podcast, you know that we love a good Notre Dame connection. Not just Marina Mabrey and Arike Ogunbowale. We've got Skylar Diggins-Smith and Brianna Turner in Phoenix. And one that I almost forgot existed in Minnesota, but reliably came back to my attention this week when they were playing the Atlanta Dream, Jess Shepard and Natalie Achonwa, which I forgot Jess Shepard was even on the Minnesota Lynx, to be perfectly honest, because she got hurt a year and a half ago. It's not my fault, okay? She tore her ACL against the Sparks in 2019. She has not played since. So this is her first season. There's a lot else going on with the Lynx. So she comes off the bench, doesn't get a ton of minutes, but yeah, that big passing with her and Achonwa, also just a really great time to watch. So yeah, that's what I was enjoying this week, was just bigs throwing the ball to bigs and scoring. And, who needs point guards to handle all of these things?
So the Notre Dame connection, it's just, I mean, neither of us went to Notre Dame. There's no reason. There's no reason
for it.
No, it's just something we found and we're just hammering in on. So if you're Fighting Irish, hi, hello. Where to start? Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's been Minnesota. We're finally leading off a podcast with Minnesota after weeks and weeks of this is what we're looking forward to. Yeah. It just astonishes me what Sylvia Fowles is doing because you can talk to a much greater degree about it. So some stats here from Synergy. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in the NBA or WNBA ever be in the 100th percentile in anything. But
I thought that
Sylvia
was
Fowles,
impossible.
I thought so too. Sylvia Fowles is first in the league in post-up points per possession, obviously, because she's 100th percentile. But I've never, ever seen that before. I thought it was a typo. But yeah, this isn't Evin Asks yet, but could you talk to me a little bit about Sylvia Fowles?
So what's funny is going into the season, Sylvia missed about half of the year last year, being injured, and she wasn't even healthy for a lot of the postseason, when Minnesota lost to Seattle. And Cheryl Reeves said that she was going to have to limit Sylvia Fowles to about 24 minutes a night just to keep her going, for the rest of the year. And then it became pretty clear, like Sylvia Fowles is averaging 29 minutes per game. That's a significant increase over 24. And when Cheryl Reeves was asked about it, she said, 24 is just a silly number. I don't know where I got 24 from. She's just not a player we can get that low. It's like, thank you. I love the idea that Cheryl Reeve, who is just this master tactician, also comes to the same decisions that we do. We're like, I don't know where I came up with that. It was a weird idea, but that was a bad idea, and I'm just going to go away from it. But I love the way Minnesota has their roster built because they have so much spacing around the court, right? Like you've got Dantas, you've got Collier, you've got Kayla McBride, you've got Crystal Dangerfield, you've got even Laisha Clarendon's threat from beyond the arc. Gives Sylvia so much space to work with inside of the paint. And like you mentioned, it goes to great effect in terms of her post-ups. You know how much I love a great steal, and the bigs on Minnesota are just really, really good at clearing out space in the paint to get to work. Like they can't throw doubles at her because there's too much shooting around her. And even when you do throw a double at her, well, Sylvia Fowles is probably 6 inches taller than whoever you're throwing at her defensively. So if she has the ball up high, like good luck. I don't really know what you plan on doing by just crowding her airspace. So yeah, what I love about Sylvia Fowles actually is that I'm sure you've read this before. I don't know, but she is going to be a mortician when she's done with the WNBA. Like that's her training, and it kind of bums me out that no one has created a really good nickname out of that for her, because there's probably a lot to work with where like bringing people to their ends, or like there's got to be something there. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but over the course of the next few weeks of this podcast, that is something that we will work on, or at least I will. But yeah, just a devastating presence inside. I mean, and she looks really healthy. It was, like I said, it was really interesting last year to watch all of these smaller sized centers sort of have to take stage in the bubble. And that's not the case anymore, right? Like you've got 6'6" Sylvia Fowles, 6'7" Sylvia Fowles, just using every inch of what she's got, like towering over her opponents. I mean, I know Minnesota had a slow start, but this is more like it.
Right. And I'm not the person for nicknames. I wish I was, but I'm not. If you have a nickname idea, send it to Sylvia Fowles, but tag us underneath or something. So, but the other thing about it that astonishes me, like if you were new to the WNBA, maybe you don't know. I mean, chances are you do know who Sylvia Fowles is, but if you don't know, I don't like talking about people's ages, but she's been around a while. So speaking of bigs, because I don't really know how to transition my way out of this situation where I was talking about somebody's age, we are both a fan of the Tina, Nikola, Jokic, Charles comparison that was being made. Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a great film breakdown on The Next, which if you are not subscribed to, you really should. It's just a wonderful way of keeping up with the WNBA, by M. Adler, who is another Blue Devil, so I'm a huge fan. But she did a really great job of breaking down what it is that Tina is doing so well this season. And like it's kind of hard to pick just one thing, because like if you forgot who Tina Charles was during this last season that she was off, or when she was kind of toiling in mediocrity in New York, when they just had absolutely nothing surrounding her with the Liberty those last few Westchester years. Like, this is a really good reminder that Tina Charles was, you know, a 2-time MOP or Player of the Year when she was at Connecticut. She probably fancies herself the best center in the league, even among all of the bigs that we were just talking about, you know, Jonquel, Liz, Syl, Brittany Griner, right? Like, all of them. And there's a real argument that Tina Charles actually is the very best big in the league because, for one, she's leading the league in scoring at 25.9 points. Just to put that in perspective, that's about 4 points ahead of where Arike Ogunbowale is in second place. So not an insignificant margin that she is working with. She's expanded her range. She's shooting 5.5 threes per game, which considering that Charles once went a whole season without attempting a three-pointer, that's a big jump. So, hey, Mike Tebow, good for you getting Charles to figure out how to play in the Washington offense. She's just doing everything, right? She's popping out for Jays. She's rolling to the basket. She's facilitating. I mean, thus the Nikola Jokic comparisons. She's top 5 in the league in rebounding. You know, Washington has had a lot of injury issues to work with, right? The perimeter is not providing the same level of scoring that we thought they would at the start of the season. Obviously, Elena Deladon is still out. Emma Meeseman, we don't know if she's coming back, when she's coming back. It doesn't really matter to Tina because for all of the, you know, the things I was saying about Sylvia Fowles earlier, Minnesota just played Washington earlier this week. Sylvia Fowles had, you know, 15 points, whatever, got to the foul line 8 times. Tina Charles just solid 31-8, you know? I mean, just up in her scoring average a little bit. I got to tell you, we went through a lot of these names for who could be the scoring champion this year. I don't think Tina Charles is on anybody's list. That was an oversight. Just unbelievable what she's doing for Washington right now. I mean, yeah, so Tina Charles out last year, back with a vengeance. She's here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and she's all out of bubblegum, right? I love centers. Centers are great. I'm so happy that they're all just doing these things.
Centers are really great. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you talked about scoring champ, centers. We talk a lot about the Connecticut Sun, but let's jump to my go-to segment, Evin Asks, because I was on Google and Wikipedia, and because you've told me I can link to below to previous episodes of what the protocol is with the EuroBasket, but so Jonquel Jones is probably the MVP frontrunner right now.
I would say so, yeah.
She's going to be leaving to play EuroBasket. I thought I had this completely wrong, but I went back and checked. She was in fact born in the Bahamas. So maybe you don't know the answer to this, but Evin asks, if Jonquel Jones was born in the Bahamas, why is she leaving the Connecticut Sun and the red hot start they've been on this season to play EuroBasket for Bosnia?
Bosnia, not the Bahamas, as we should point out here. So it's not entirely unprecedented for players to naturalize for other countries so they can play for them in international competition. Usually you see this when a player, you know, has dual citizenship, right? You know, they were born one place, they grew up another place, their parents have, you know, a history in some other country, or they simply are not of the talent level to make it for Team USA, because playing for Team USA as a basketball player is an incredibly difficult task, right? Like, Team USA women are the very best team in the world and are on an undefeated gold medal streak at the Olympics since 1996, when women's basketball was introduced to the Olympics. Jonquel Jones, though, not exactly the type of player who wouldn't be able to make the Olympic team, right? We're talking about an MVP frontrunner here, right? She has been 6th Woman of the Year. She's been Most Improved Player. She's been an All-Star. She's been on all WNBA teams. Kind of weird that she would say, hey, I don't want to play for the US. I'm going to play for Bosnia. All due respect to the good people of Bosnia, not exactly a basketball powerhouse. I don't think Jonquel is expecting to win EuroBasket with this team. However, we've mentioned before that players have to go overseas during the offseason to supplement their incomes because the WNBA salaries are capped at, well, now it's a little bit above 200,000, but it has been much lower, you know, for most of Jonquel's career in the W. So they go overseas to play for these teams. And there is a limitation on the number of American players that each team that competes in EuroLeague can have. So they obviously want to sign as many Americans as possible because some of the Americans are the very best in the world, obviously. But they can't just go willy-nilly and make their team fully American. They have to abide by these rules on the number of internationals they have versus the number of European players they have. So Jonquel, in order to make herself more attractive to overseas teams, gets European citizenship via Bosnia, and now doesn't take up one of those American slots on these EuroLeague teams. So she plays for a team in Russia, ECAT, where they already have Brittany Griner. They already have Courtney Vandersloot. They've got Allie Quigley. Kayla McBride has played there in the past. Brianna Stewart plays there. A lot of Americans already, and a couple of them who are unwilling to give up their American citizenship because they have played for USA in the Olympics. So Jonquel has to get European citizenship. Thus, she's Bosnian. And because the Bosnians have done her a service of getting her the citizenship, she has to participate with them in international competition in EuroBasket. I don't know if they're going to get beyond the group stage. Connecticut probably hopes that they don't, but that's where Jonquel is for now.
Questions. So many questions.
Sure.
So why Bosnia? It was the easiest to acquire citizenship, or?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I couldn't give you the proper answer to that. I assume that it's because, like, it's a little weird for a country to just say, like, hey, you can be Bosnian because you need it for work, right? Like, not everyone is totally down with that. So you have to just find like a willing match between a country that is like needs you on their basketball team. And that's basically where Jonquel landed. I could not tell you why she picked Bosnia. Maybe she started her overseas career there. That would be strange. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, just because it's such a popular segment, this is what people tweet about.
Yeah.
Evin asks, has anything sparked joy for you this week?
The Sparks are actually playing pretty well. Always a good opportunity when you get to play the Indiana Fever. Makes you look quite good, I would say. And also a good opportunity to play the Chicago Sky without Candace Parker. So obviously the Sparks took advantage of their opportunities by winning games against teams that were at a deficit, which is what you have to do. They still remain flummoxed by the Dallas Wings. Can't seem to figure them out. It's okay. Dallas is, they've got a lot going on. So no shame in losing to Dallas. But yeah, kind of fun watching the Sparks play a little bit more of a spaced out system. It hasn't quite resulted in the aesthetically pleasing offense you would like to see, but it is a lot more palatable than what they were doing at the start of the season. I think a lot of that has to do with playing Amanda Zawibi and Nia Coffey as the starting bigs because both of them have some range. They can stretch out. Stabilizing the second unit by bringing Brittany Sykes in with the reserves, I think, has also helped quite a bit because the distribution of good players was a little too tilted toward the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. And now there's, some better rotation management. So yeah, some fun things with the Sparks. Also, just has to be mentioned about the Sparks. They forced turnovers on 25.9% of opposing possessions, which an obscene amount of turnovers, and the number of them that are forced between half court and the 3-point line, just like you can't even dribble against some of these guards. It's harassment, I would say, to opposing teams. And for as much as their offense has given me grief, their defense is freaking awesome to watch.
I can tell you that I was trying to thread the Sparks Sky game. It was relatively easy for me because I was able to manage Courtney Vandersloot, like we talked about, Diamond DeShields. They were put under a lot of pressure, but that allowed me to really watch what was going on and what they were trying to do. It's just their offense had no hum at all, but the Sparks guards and wings just put a lot of pressure. The wings game, however, I was not able to thread, even though I really wanted to, just because it's some serious windshield wiper action. I just couldn't keep up. I tried to record clips, didn't work. I just gave up. It made me give up. But if we're going to talk about the wings, and we talk buzzer beaters at the top of the pod, I guess we should talk about our games of the week.
Yeah.
a little bit different this time around. You took a game and I took a game. Interestingly, I guess spoiler, both games had buzzer beaters. So
yeah, we're kind of cheating on the concept again with game of the week because we took two, but so long as the WNBA is doing these 2-game sets, I think it's fair for us to pick both games of the set because it's still the same two teams. We're still working with the same scout. We did this in our first pod too with the Storm and the Aces. So in case you haven't figured it out yet, we are talking about Seattle and Dallas, who played each other on Friday and Sunday of last week. And like Evin said, both these games ended in buzzer beaters. Kind of ridiculous how different the two games turned out, like other than the very ending, because we've got one game that was 105 to 102, and then another game that was 68-67, just a couple of days apart between the same teams. Ridiculous that either of these teams was able to play the level of defense that would allow them to hold each other to 68 and 67 points. But I'm going to start with the first game between the two. I think it's pretty clear at this point that Storm have a best four with Brianna Stewart, Jewell Loyd, Sue Bird, and Mercedes Russell. And yes, I'm including Mercedes Russell because all of their best lineups seem to involve her. I like Ezzy quite a bit. I just don't think that she's quite ready for championship level WNBA basketball. She just makes a few too many mistakes, and Mercedes does not. Mercedes is so very solid, and you just watch her run a pick and roll with Sue Bird, and it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you need on the court with these other two players. So that being said, you've got that four. Who that fifth player ends up being is kind of a crapshoot in any given moment. So it could be Katie Lou Samuelson, who obviously was away for 3-on-3 and just recently came back. So they're trying to figure out how to reintegrate her. She was starting to begin the year. She's not right now. So we'll see how that works. Doesn't seem like her jumper has quite come back since she returned to Seattle. So hard to fit her in when that's not happening. We've got Jordan Canada, who nominally is the backup point guard, even though they also have Epiphany Prince. I do think she plays much better next to Sue Bird than without her. And she obviously provides this ferocity at the point of attack defensively and just runs down your throat in transition. So that's another direction that the Storm could go. You've got Stephanie Talbot, who started the game against the Dallas Wings. And Talbot is the Sammy Whitcomb replacement, right? She's an Aussie, but she is a really good shooter. She's got some good size defensively. She gets into it. And what I really like about Talbot is she's just a really good cutter. Like very first possession of the game, she cuts into the paint with like 23 seconds already elapsed off of the shot clock. Ends up gacking the layup, but it's a really good action, to get that option. So I don't even think Seattle has figured out who they want because they started the game with Stephanie Talbot. They ended the game with Jordan Canada in the fourth quarter. Then they bring Talbot back. They had Prince in for a little bit. Candace Dupree, they've decided is a 5, so she doesn't really get any chances with that lineup. I don't understand the Candace Dupree experiment in Seattle yet, mostly because I don't think of her as a center. And I don't think it was an accident that a lot of Dallas's biggest runs came when Dupree was on the court in that game because someone needs to play center. I'm just going to put that out there. If you're going to sign Candace Dupree, play her at the 3 or the 4. I don't know why you play her at the 5. But anyway, beyond that. Lots of things to love in this game. Mentioned Katie Lou is back. Alicia Gray is back, and to much greater effect, I would say. We're going to talk about first steps a lot among people in this game. Alicia Gray's got a great first step, and she just puts her head down and gets to the paint. I love, love, love watching her play. Also, just a player with goggles is very much aesthetically my style. So thank you, Alicia Gray, for keeping that in the arsenal. It's a good look. It's a really good look. She had this one play in the overtime where she forces a steal on the perimeter, goes all the way down, takes the score. She's got another one where Talbot's guarding her and she just beats her with her first step again in the overtime. The big runs that Dallas had to tie the game at the end of the third and then also to tie the game at the end of regulation, all kind of spearheaded by what Alicia Gray is doing just to get down the floor. It's very clear how much they missed her because Dallas naturally has a lot of perimeter scoring, but they don't have that wing-sized player. And I think they envision Sabali more as like a 4-5 when maybe she could play the 3. I don't really know. I'd love to see her there if Dallas had enough competent bigs to play next to her. So yeah, Alicia Gray, just keep doing what you're doing because I'm going to be honest, like I wasn't sure if she was going to like fade into the background with everything else that Dallas had going on this year. But no, she's awesome. And she even took a charge on Jewell Loyd in transition at the end of that game. And like Seattle is pretty much infallible in transition, right? Like the way they run the break is poetry in motion, right? You've got Sue Bird throwing outlets. You've got Jewell Loyd streaking down the court. You've got Breanna Stewart just filling in all the gaps. I mean, to stop a break that Sue Bird is leading with Jewell Loyd coming down the center of the floor is wizardry. So kudos to you, Alicia Gray. Just really, really impressive stuff.
Right. What's so crazy to me is hearing about everybody that contributed on the wing side, how great their game was on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
They did not do that. Let's just say that on Sunday. I could talk about it in a little bit, but the difference between Alicia Gray in the third game, I guess now that they've played, because they put the first two games they have played have gone into overtime, which is insanity. The difference is Alicia Gray, I believe she came off the bench in your game.
No. I think so. No, she started. Does she start? I think Marina's been coming off the bench.
Yes, sorry. Okay. So
no, she came off the bench in the first one. Sorry, my bad. Yeah.
I believe the reason I'm confused is because I think Marina definitely came off the bench in my game and started in yours. And correct. I think it was just a straight swap between her and Alicia. But yeah, it felt as if Marina, who we've talked about a lot, and Alicia just sort of, they didn't disappear because the Storm did very intentional things to take them out of the game. But it's just, yeah, it's wild hearing about your game, knowing that the next game they were kind of, there's not really that much of a story there with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of my game, one person who did not disappear from one game to the next, and I apologize for bearing the lead, was Jewell Loyd. Once again, I asked the question, can anyone stop Jewell Loyd's first step? Preliminarily, my answer is no. Just the way she's navigating the court right now, I mean, she was already excellent the last 3 seasons, ever since Seattle won their first title in 2018. I mean, people forget that she was the number 1 overall pick, right? The year before they got Stewie. And like, she has been no small part of their success over the last 3 seasons. She's so confident with her game in the half court. Like, Arike Ogunbowale's guarding her and she just blows by her on the baseline, right? She's got the crossover to get to her spots on the floor. I mean, if you put her in a 2-man action with Breanna Stewart, good luck. I don't know how you're supposed to stop that. They ran a give and go at the end of regulation. That legitimately one of the prettiest plays I've seen in the WNBA this season. She's so comfortable with her jumper right now. She's facilitating. I mean, I mentioned earlier on the break how she is such a huge part of their transition attack because of her speed getting up and down the court. And then, of course, we have to talk about the fact that she is the gold mamba and has the ability to hit these clutch shots. The first one I remember happening was last year against Los Angeles Sparks when both teams were competing for one of the buys in the postseason, the double buys, I should say. And Sparks are up by 2 points with about 0.9 seconds left, something to that effect. And Jewell Loyd steps out of bounds before taking the shot. They did not call it that way, but she does hit the shot. And Seattle ends up winning. I really think of that as a major turning point for the Sparks season, by the way, if that was unclear.
Had a feeling that was coming, but okay.
Anyway, so Jewell Loyd's got the buzzer beater thing in her arsenal, right? You don't get a nickname like the Gold Mama just for being a run-of-the-mill player during the first 38 minutes of the game. It's because of clutch time. And Noelle Quinn draws up the look for her. There's a couple actions, right? Brianna's cutting to the basket and Jewell's popping out. And a lot of people have said this already, but I love that Jewell Loyd's response was, I just took a normal shot, even though there's less than a second left on the clock and she's like 5 feet beyond the 3-point line. A normal shot, for the win against Dallas. She hits it. She does what I consider a Lou Williams celebration of, getting the crowd pumped up.
Yep.
This is what I remember Lou well doing. And just what a great moment, a lot of great Notre Dame talent on the court there, right? Obviously, Arike had a really good game, had her own moments of, using her first step to great effect. But Jewell just had command of the game from the very start. And even like when it seemed like Seattle was in these situations where they might be, losing the plot. Like at the start of the fourth quarter, Dallas has just gone on this 11-0 run. Literally the very first play of the fourth quarter, someone sets a back screen, Jewell's got a three on the wing, splash, like, okay, Seattle's feeling comfortable again. And for her to assume that leadership role on this team that already has Stewie, already has Sue Bird, it's very cool to watch her progression. And my goodness, that top three on Seattle is devastating.
It is something else entirely. Shameless plug. I have a Jewell Loyd video
nice.
from her bubble scoring, and her footwork it's what you'd expect from somebody who takes after Kobe's game, but it's also the ability for her to do just every different thing. You take one thing away, you take first step, drive, you work to take that away if you can. And she has the step back, she has the pull back, she has the pump fake and drive. And there's nothing she doesn't have an answer to offensively. And I think with the losses of Natasha Howard, Sammy Wickham, Belisha Clark, her jump to improve as a defender, I think, is going to be, obviously the Storm are overwhelming with how good they are offensively, but defensively, I think she's really taken it up a notch. And so that top three it blows my mind. It blows my mind.
I mean, they're all number one picks, so what are you going to do?
That's true.
There's a reason that they were selected at that point in the draft. But, I would say that the first game that I covered was not exactly the defensive showcase, we might be looking for from Jewell Loyd. Like, Arike had her way with her on occasion. Marina had her way with her on occasion. Maybe the game that you spent more time on is a better time to talk about defense.
I'm going to be honest with you. No, it wasn't. So the game that I had ended, as you said, 68-67. And I don't think it was a defensive slugfest by any stretch of the imagination. It was, these teams just scored 100 points. They're tired.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of missed wide open shots. So for the Wings, 25 of 70, and for the Storm, 21 of 61. Like I said, not stifling defense. It's just, when I talk about some of the plays the Storm ran, it's not as if there were rim deterrents or the pressure was so overwhelming. In fact, you will find that they were open a lot of the time and they just missed these shots. It would be crazy to not start at the end, so I will start at the end. Arike, I don't know personally. Matt Ellentuck says Arike Ogunbowale is inevitable. And that's sort of what happened here. I watched the game live. Like I told you, I watched the game live. I watched it back in preparation for this. I cannot explain to you how it happened. Okay. So the final 2:30 of the game, the Storm are up by 7. Arike has 14 points. She outscored the Storm 10-2 to close the game out. She got a layup, and then the Storm come down. They run a play where Jewell Loyd attacks baseline. She gets fouled, goes to the free throw line, hits those free throws. And then, effectively, Arike goes on an 8-0 run. She does the first by... Actually, it's masterful. If you are a fan of, as my friend Samson Folk says, if you're a fan of grifting, the Arike free throws that she got were grift. They showed a replay, no contact at all, but she was able to sell it. She was on the ground, leading scorer last year. You have to call that. You put her on the line. And then it felt as if the game was over, truly, because the Wings seemed to take their time. The Wings are passing the ball around. It doesn't look like it's going to amount to anything. They work the ball around. It looks like it's going nowhere. And then you have Jewell Loyd on Arike at the top of the key. Again, like, I don't know why I started talking about defense. Jewell Loyd's defense has impressed me this year. I think her defense was great, but Arike is, like Matt says, inevitable. So she waits for a ball screen. She takes a violent sidestep, and then she hits it over Jewell. And at that point, it's 65-67 with 31 seconds left. The Storm have the best game manager today in Sue Bird, and you have weapons like Breanna Stewart, Mercedes Russell, like you talked about. Katie Lou Samuelson is a great free throw shooter. Jewell Loyd, obviously. The wings play it straight up, which surprised me. So Jewell Loyd ends up with Izzy Harrison on her, and she attacks. And she ends up missing the layup. There's a scramble for the ball, but Izzy is actually able to come up with the ball with her hands over her head in traffic, 2 Storm players around her. She outlets it to Kayla Thornton. At this point, I think, they're going to get 2 the other way, because Marina is at this point sprinting past Kayla, and Arike is not that far behind, and they sort of X right by her. But Kayla, I guess, isn't able to corral it and hit it ahead. So she hugs the ball, and they take a timeout. 4.7 seconds left. And then that sets up, I don't understand how it happened, but the most insane game winner thus far. I'm sure everybody
pleased.
Just there was a scramble. Marina says that's not how the play was supposed to go, and she catches the ball with her back to the basket, and Jordan Canada is on her. Point of attack defender that Jordan Canada is all over her, and I don't know how she's able to turn, face, take a sort of, again, that violent sidestep to the right dribble, arcing all the way up, her legs flailing out, and then she swishes it, and I don't know what happened.
This is what Arike does. This is how she made her name in college when she was a junior, when they won the national title. She hits the buzzer beaters, not just in the Final Four, but in the national championship game. I mean, she had an opportunity to tie the national championship game in the very next season. Ultimately doesn't go her way, but this is what Ogunbowale does. Like, she loves this time. I mean, I think it's very fitting that they both have that Irish pedigree, because like her and Jewell Loyd, right, to have that mirror image of one another in back-to-back games, like something's in the water there. Like, it's just working.
Yeah. Okay, so the small details of the entire rest of the game. Okay, so as I said, Alicia and Marina were sort of taken out of this game. Marina, it was extremely obvious what the Storm decided to do. I looked this up. I looked the stats up. The very first meeting, the one we talked about, where she had that,
that like 40-footer from the logo through, yeah.
It was a choice.
Yeah.
But 26 points on 10 of 18 shooting, 6 for 14 on threes, 5 assists in their first meeting. The game that went to overtime, 24 points, 10 of 17 shooting, 4 for 8 on threes, 3 assists. The Storm made a conscious effort to show Marina bodies on the pick and roll when she was coming off the pick and roll. So I don't necessarily know if you would call it a blitz, if they were hedging, because it seemed like they were keeping her off balance with a mix of the two, but they did it a few times, and she did seem bothered by it. She was bothered by it to the tune of 5 turnovers. And, well, actually, I would like to talk about the ball pressure she was facing. It did give her problems a lot of the time, but there was one possession where she had this insane, I tweeted it at you. I said I was gonna make us talk about this if I have to, but goodness gracious. 8:59 in the second. Katie Lou Samuelson is on her. Satu goes to set a ball screen. It's Candice Dupree defending Satu. Katie Lou has size. When these two are coming together, they are pushing Marina to the sideline. They're both on her. Like I said, I don't necessarily know if it was a hedge, because it didn't seem like they were interested in recovering, but it didn't necessarily seem like a blitz to me, because they weren't as aggressive as they should have been. And Marina jumps up in the air and is able to make this insane hook pass from about the hash mark to Bella underneath the basket, and she's able to lay it up and in. But I was, wow.
Marina's got some goods as a passer that I think go a little underrated because of, her ballsiness as a scorer. But like even in the first game, she had this transition pass in like the second quarter where she just delivers like perfect dot. Like the kind of thing we talk about, like Chelsea Gray, like that level of precision on the pass. And like, I mean, I know she's kind of the point guard. Like I'm not really sure. I guess Mariah Jefferson is the point guard now in Dallas, but yeah, I don't know that her passing is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about her, and it probably shouldn't be, considering all the other things that Marina Mabrey does. But yeah, her ability to just find windows it's pretty impressive, and it's the kind of thing that's been developing over her past 3 years. Like eventually, we'll talk about like most improved, I suppose, on this podcast later in the season, but
True.
Putting her name in that conversation, I would say.
Absolutely. And while we're on the subject of passes, she has another one. Again, they show two on her, Jewell Loyd and Mercedes Russell, and she sort of retreat dribbles, which is what you want. This one looks more like an out-and-out blitz. She starts to retreat, and Izzy Harrison on the roll. She scoops, shovels it to Izzy, who pumps, gets Breanna Stewart up in the air, steps through, and one. And I don't want to say that was the turning point, because that's the crazy thing about the Wings, is that I don't necessarily understand how they stay in these games, or in fact keep games close. I don't understand how they let other teams in it, but they do. And it's always a nail biter, which I think maybe Arike wants, but I don't.
Couple things before I move on to the film portion for you. What did the Storm do to Sabali in the second game? Because I was really intrigued by her just going after Breanna Stewart in the first game. Like she straight up just sized her up on a couple jumpers and she attacked her hard in the paint. A lot of confidence against, the reigning finals MVP. But then second game, almost an offer for her, right?
She scored on free throws. But I think she does have ball handling chops. Like that is her value as of right now. But I think it was more what I was saying earlier. It's not necessarily what they did to take her out of the game. It's just that she just missed shots, it seemed like.
Gotcha.
Although there were moments, there was I have to talk about this. It was such a great take. It was the very first play of the game, I believe, where Satu looks like she's going to dribble handoff and Breanna Stewart is on her. This probably tells you the whole story of the game for her. So she is dribbling to the left wing, looking to hand the ball off, and then she quickly turns the corner. And Breanna Stewart, we talk a lot about everything she can do offensively. She is a world-class defensive player. She does not get beat like this. She got beat off the dribble. And so Satu gets into the lane and Mercedes Russell rotates over and contests. And Satu puts up a quick left-handed shot that goes, well, it just misses off the backboard. But that's about it. Is great moves, everything you would want, but it just turns into a miss. Her very last field goal of the game actually it came in semi-transition. Well, I say it came in transition. She's able to pick off a Sue Bird entry pass into Horns, and she's dribbling it down the other way. And she's got her defender on her hip on the right side. She got Sue Bird. She's not sprinting ahead of her. Sue is doing her darndest. She gets in position and she's just not able to finish it. She has the angle, it looks like, but I'm not upset at a young big pushing the ball in transition after the steal and then taking it all the way and then missing. Those are things you can clean up. But those are the two times that she was able to get all the way to the basket. The rest of them were jump shots, and you live with the makes, you live with the misses. So
I'm really glad you brought up that fake handoff play, because the same thing happened in the fourth quarter of the first game where, the Wings were down by 10 points and they make this ferocious comeback to tie the game to send it into overtime. And I think they're down by 8 at this point. And Satu does the very same thing where she's on the left wing. She kind of fakes as if she's going to hand off into the corner. Breanna just loses her positioning for just an iota, and then she just drives past her and gets to the basket, and the help was not there. Or if it was, she just finished over it. But very similar action. So it's interesting that worked twice for her.
Yeah, Brianna does not get got.
No.
I guess she found. Okay. Speaking of misses, oh man, this is a rough way to segue into the film. Okay, but speaking of misses, the very first play I would like to highlight is this storm set where it's a double stagger screen. And I talk about double staggers. I am now realizing how much I talk about double staggers because me and these other coaches, some call it two away, some call it, yeah, whatever. It's not that important, but there are coaches that I know who are insistent on calling it motion strong, and I just call it strong. So I think that's why I talk about double staggers so much, is because I'm trying to push my own agenda. But the Storm love playing out of this delay set where Sue Bird is bringing the ball down, Breanna Stewart is the trailer, and so it's a swing to Breanna at the top of the key, and she reverses the ball. And what's going to happen is Sue and Breanna are going to set a double stagger for Jewell Loyd coming out of the corner. Jewell Loyd gets swung the ball at the top, and then it turns into a pick and roll. Breanna Stewart knows what coverage is coming, so she slips. Jewell Loyd is able to hit her with a great push pass, and Stewart catches the ball in the middle of the lane and is able to turn. Terrific footwork. Mercedes Russell is crashing in from the nucker spot, and Breanna Stewart can drop it off, but instead she decides to go up, and she just misses. The ball literally hangs on the rim for a second and then drops. And that's, again, the story of the game, is these were just misses. It's not as if the teams were making stuff happen. Although you have to be there, so give them some credit. But I wanted to point that out. So in the third quarter, they come back to their strong series. It would be really cool if you watched the Storm game and you thought of this now, because there's an alliteration aspect to it too. But so again, Sue Bird swings the ball to Breanna in delay. Breanna reverses it across, and they go to set that double stagger for Jewell Loyd in the right corner. Jewell Loyd decides to twirl between the two screens, so she curls right off of Sue Bird. And this is what I was talking about with the defense. I'm not exaggerating, there is nobody in the lane. It's completely emptied out. The nice thing about this is, if you look at it, right after Jewell curls, Sue is curling off of Breanna. So there are options there in that if you're a coach and you would like to incorporate this play into your playbook. Okay. Just generally very happy with the Storm offense, as always. It's not as if they just have these three world-ending players and they just say, here's the ball, make stuff happen. There's so much motion and activity. So if we go back to the beginning of the third quarter, the play right out of halftime it's it's making a comeback. The floppy set, where it's the two perimeter players getting screens from two bigs at about the block-ish area, and they cross off like that. So the Storm run this, and Jewell Loyd comes off of Mercedes Russell, and she ends up free throw line extended. Mercedes Russell is flashing up to the free throw line, up the lane line, and Sue Bird swings her the ball. And it flows into backdoor step, blind pig, whatever you'd like to call it. But it's basically this action where the big gets past the ball, and there's a player who's essentially being denied, or most of the time it's denied, and they go backdoor. So it's a catch, swing, and you can backdoor step. Now what happens here is Jewell Loyd gets into the lane, gets fouled, free throws. The next time we see this action, it's actually super cool. I continue to talk about the X's and O's of the WNBA are amazing to me. So much fun. So next time down, well, actually there was a fast break in between this, but next half court set down, almost the same action. Floppy, where Jewell Loyd is coming up, and again, Mercedes Russell is coming up to receive the ball in that backdoor step. Nothing comes of it, And so Sue flows to the ball. Mercedes Russell swings her back the ball. And now Sue is getting 2 screens, one from Mercedes Russell and one from Breanna Stewart. Stewie, after setting that first screen, then gets a flare screen from Mercedes Russell. And Sue swings her the ball. She is wide open, hits the rim, bounces up, goes out. And so it's just that type of stuff that, that was the difference in the game. Is the Storm. Well, actually, that's not necessarily fair. Everybody missed shots, but great action, just people missing their shots. And I had a whole lot to talk about for Atlanta, but I think we'll save it for
Okay.
I think we'll save it for next week. Just because, Kennedy Carter is out indefinitely, which is unfortunate. But Ari McDonald, they look fun. She looks super fun. Everybody
Speaking of players with killer first steps, Tiffany Hayes, very much in that company.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? I can show a bunch of we can just show a bunch of highlights here of the Dream just ruining teams with hyper aggressive show, blitz, blocks, etc., etc. Monique Billings just actually shout out again to M. It was in her film room that I first saw that the Dream run a 1-3-1 zone, which is it's cool. Not the Jokic one, obviously, because the Dream weren't in the Tina Jokic Charles one. The Dream Lynx one, because the Dream have to be involved. Wow, this went badly for me. Yeah, a 1-3-1 zone is super interesting. I coach against it at the high school level, and yeah, not very often you get to see it professionally. You'll see 2-3, 3-2, but that's the fun thing about Atlanta. And then another thing is Atlanta last game against the Storm, actually. It was a sideline out of bounds for Seattle, and they came out in a 1-2-2 matchup zone, which, speaking of something you don't get to see very often, it gave up a Katie Lou Samuelson open 3-pointer at the wing, which is, I know she struggled recently, but it's not something you want to give up. So I don't know if, it ended up being a miss, but I don't know if that's the shot you want. So who knows if it was a win. But
I'm all for creativity when it comes to defending the Storm, because you got to just shake them up out of their comfort zone a little bit. And, if it's Katie Lou Samuelson getting a shot versus one of those other 4 players we talked about, like maybe that is a win in terms of defending them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, that was my thing, is it's the question of process versus result. The process was, but the result is something you wanted.
Yeah.
Speaking of...
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of things we wanted, as we are recording this, I got a notification talking about how a certain podcast that we are both big fans of is back.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Tea with A and Fee, because that was like true highlight of the bubble, was the two of them being able to just hang out and record a podcast together every week. They're so funny. The banana bread thing is so silly. Like who puts sour cream in banana bread anyway? I've never done that. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what Asia Wilson is getting in her head about that, but I hope that's something that gets resolved this season, that she gets to find banana bread that she likes, because it's a treat. Asia's really missing out.
I agree. Asia had guac for the first time. I believe it was yesterday. Have you seen this tweet?
I did see this. I saw it matched up with Giannis's tweet about him having a smoothie for the first time and saying "God bless America." So yeah, it's great that our MVPs are having these culinary experiences, even if they were a bit more delayed than you might expect. But hey, I don't know if guacamole is big in South Carolina. Maybe it's not.
Right.
So here we go.
It's all good for them. Good for them. I'm happy. They went outside of their comfort zones, and that's important.
That's important.
Speaking of hoping that Asia tries banana bread at some point. What are some of the things you were excited about this upcoming week?
Other than Asia's food experiences, yeah, I'm really excited that Candace Parker's back. And I know that she already played her first game, but that was against the Indiana Fever. And with all due respect, I would rather see her play a team that is not the Indiana Fever. So yeah, more Candace Parker in my life, always a good thing. I just want to shout out two of the people who listen to this podcast, Curtis and Karina, both of them who asked for us to just talk about Dallas, Seattle, and asked us to ask Kathy to make all of the games Dallas versus Seattle. Here you are.
Right.
We love talking about Dallas versus Seattle, so that'd be a good thing.
It's true. If this was a, well, I mean, they've already played 3 games. If it was a 4-game series, best of 7, it might be done by now. But Curtis, your stuff is invaluable. I cannot tell you how much time I've lost exploring across the timeline. So link to that below. Krina, friend of mine, she is the Liberty expert that I refer to. That's who she covers, and huge fan of this podcast. According to her, she's tweeted at us saying she's the #1 fan. That's not for me to decide.
Hey, I'm here for it. If you want to give yourself that title, no one else has taken it, so go for it.
Right. Well, I mean, Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when the All-Star game details get finalized, we will know for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as long as Dallas versus Seattle is giving us delightful details like Isabel Harrison performing a step through at the end of the 4th quarter, like, here we go.
Right. And as the season rolls along and we get more step throughs, shout out to Christy Tolliver, who had one. You
really
were at
great
that game
against Chicago. Yeah.
Right. You were
Just
at that game.
I
was watching the game. So great.
I appreciate the attempt, Christy. I really do.
Yeah. Yep. Christy, I'm a big fan from your time in Washington, especially, but shout out to Panda. Okay. All right. So unless, Sabreena, you have anything else, I think that's it for us this week.
Yeah. And again, if you guys see anything during the week that you want us to talk about, let us know, and we'll see you back next week.
Bye.